The morning fog wrapped around the cobbled streets of Vienna's inner Stadt like a silk veil. Marcus Rayner tightened his scarf as he walked through the brisk November air. It had been 3 months since the divorce, and he still wasn't used to the deafening silence of his empty apartment. The nights were the hardest, endless hours staring at the ceiling, listening to the ticking of the old wall clock. Insomnia had become his most loyal companion. That morning, with nothing scheduled at the restoration studio, he decided to wander aimlessly through the historic city center. That's when he noticed a little antique shop he'd never seen before, squeezed between a coffee shop and a bookstore. A faded sign above the door read, "Gruber Antiques." In the window display, an 18th century Austrian pendulum clock immediately caught his eye. As he stepped inside, the soft chime of a tiny bell announced his presence. An elderly woman emerged from the shadows, her sky-blue eyes piercingly bright against her time-worn face. "The clock in the window," Marcus said, pointing. "May I take a closer look?" The woman, who introduced herself as Elise Gruber, hesitated, then gave a slow nod. As she carefully removed the clock from the display, Marcus noticed something in her demeanor. Part relief, part unease. She seemed like someone passing on a burden rather than making a sale. Marcus examined the piece with a trained eye. The dark wooden case was intricately carved with figures dancing at a masquerade ball. The mechanism was in excellent condition, but the escapement was oddly designed, giving the ticking an ever so slightly irregular rhythm. "It was made by Friedrich Schauer," said Mrs. Gruber. "He was a clockmaker for the imperial court, a genius, but a troubled man." The price was shockingly low for something so rare. As she wrapped the clock, the old woman added in a low voice, "Just a bit of advice, don't let it run for too long, especially at night." Marcus smiled. He was used to superstitions surrounding antique pieces. Back at his apartment, he placed the clock on his work table. When he wound it, a soft melody played, hauntingly beautiful notes that seemed to fill every corner of the room. What he didn't know was that from that moment on, time in his apartment would stop following the usual rules. Marcus jolted awake at 3:33 a.m. A faint melody was drifting from the office, even though he was sure he hadn't activated any music mechanism. When he stepped into the room, he saw the clock bathed in moonlight as if it were glowing from within. The moment he approached, the music stopped dead. Over the next few days, strange occurrences began piling up. Marcus would lose track of hours without realizing it. All the clocks in his apartment showed different times, and the carved figures on the clock, they started to subtly shift positions. Every night, like clockwork, he'd wake at 3:33 a.m., always with the eerie feeling that he was being watched. His dreams became saturated with visions of an 18th century ballroom, filled with masked dancers swaying to the same melody from the clock. In each dream, a man in a golden mask stood at a distance watching him in silence. Shaken and deeply curious, Marcus called his friend, Professor Anton Weber, an expert in 18th century Austrian artifacts. Anton was immediately intrigued by the mention of Schauer's clock and came over the next day. "Extraordinary," the professor whispered, peering into the mechanism. "This escapement, it's like it was designed to create an unstable rhythm on purpose." Anton brought with him several old documents about Schauer. "He started out as a regular clockmaker," he explained, "but over time, his interests took a turn. There are records linking him to alchemical and occult circles in Vienna." One 1762 illustration showed an identical clock. Schauer presented it to the emperor as his masterpiece. He called it the Zeitgeist, the spirit of time. 3 days later, he vanished. No one ever saw him again. When Marcus mentioned the recurring dreams, the masquerade ball, and the melody playing at precisely 3:33 a.m., Anton went pale. One of these documents says Schauer believed that at 3:33 a.m., the barrier between temporal dimensions was at its thinnest. He called it the Zeitfenster, the time window. As the days passed, the temporal distortions intensified. Marcus's apartment no longer obeyed normal time. It felt like a bubble where hours stretched, paused, or reversed unpredictably. He and Anton dove deeper into their research. They discovered that Schauer had experimented with alchemy and obscure theories on time manipulation. He was convinced that time wasn't a straight line, but a dimension that could be folded, bent, or reshaped. "There's something engraved on the clock's main plate," Marcus said during a closer inspection. Anton took photos of the strange symbols and sent them to a colleague who specialized in alchemical texts. "It's a variation of a transmutation spell," she explained, "but not for metals, for time. This mechanism, combined with the melody, generates a resonance that opens what Schauer called the Zeitor, the time gate." Meanwhile, Marcus tried to revisit the antique shop, Gruber Antiques. But when he returned to the spot between the coffee shop and the bookstore, there was nothing. Just a blank wall. He asked the nearby shop owners, but they all gave the same answer. "That space has been empty for years." "Elise Gruber?" Marcus asked the elderly bookseller next door. The man frowned, thoughtful. "There was a Gruber family here a long time ago. The last one. Elise, I think. She passed away back in the 80s. Chills ran down Marcus's spine. When he got back to his apartment, something about the clock made him stop in his tracks. One of the carved dancers, it looked exactly like Mrs. Gruber, and another one, which he was certain hadn't been there before, bore an uncanny resemblance to himself. The nights grew worse. At exactly 3:33, the clock would begin its haunting melody. Sometimes modern items in the apartment would flicker and briefly transform into 18th century versions. His lamp into a candle holder, his phone into a leather-bound notebook. His dreams were becoming more vivid, if they were dreams at all. Then, one night, everything changed. In the dream, Schauer finally approached him. "We meet at last, Herr Rayner," he said in a calm, measured voice. "How do you know my name?" Marcus asked. Schauer chuckled. "I've known you for a long time. Or I will. Time is relative, isn't it? What do you want from me?" "It's not what I want from you, Marcus. It's what you can do for all of us. This moment, this ball, it's a convergence point. A rare moment when the fabric of time is unusually soft. Because it was on this night that I made my greatest mistake, and now I need your help to undo it." The dream shifted. Marcus saw a young woman in a flowing blue dress, elegant and serene. "My Elizabeth," said Schauer's voice. "She died that night. An accident. Or so they said." Marcus saw her lying lifeless at the bottom of a grand staircase. "But I knew it wasn't an accident. She was murdered, and I built the clock to return to that moment to save her." "Did it work?" Marcus asked quietly. Schauer shook his head. "The mechanism worked. I created the portal, but I learned something terrible. I could observe the past, relive it, but I couldn't change it." He stepped closer. "But you, Herr Rayner, you can. You exist outside this timeline. For you, that moment isn't fixed in history yet." Marcus woke with a start, breathless. The clock wasn't just some strange artifact. It was a desperate attempt to rewrite the past. Anton dug deeper and confirmed that the winter ball where Elizabeth had died took place on December 21st, 1762. "The clock is creating a temporal overlap," Anton explained. "And on the 21st, the barrier between timelines will be at its weakest." Marcus had a choice to make: destroy the clock and risk being trapped forever, or step into Schauer's past and try to save a woman who'd been dead for over 250 years. "I'm going," he said finally. "I'm going to try." On the night of December 21st, Marcus and Anton waited in the office. Just before midnight, the clock began to play its haunting melody. The walls of the apartment began to tremble, and then dissolve. In their place stood the grand ballroom of Schönbrunn Palace, glittering under candlelight. "It's happening," Anton whispered. "The portal is opening." Marcus, now dressed in period clothing, took a deep breath and stepped forward. Not into the center of his office, but into the very heart of the 1762 ball, existing now in the same space. A wave of vertigo hit him, and then he was there. In 1762, the grand clock in the ballroom read 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes. That's all he had. He scanned the room and quickly spotted her, Elizabeth wearing a light blue gown and a silver mask. Watching from a distance was Shower, his eyes quietly following her. Their eyes met. Shower gave him a slight, knowing nod. Marcus followed Elizabeth through the crowd and soon noticed a man in military uniform tailing her with dark intentions. As the man reached for her, positioning to push her down the stairs, Marcus shouted. A struggle broke out. In the scuffle, the attacker lost his footing and tumbled violently down the steps, the very staircase where Elizabeth was meant to die. Before Marcus could react, Elizabeth turned, her expression a mix of confusion and gratitude. But the world around him was already crumbling. And then, nothing. Marcus woke up on the floor of his office. Anton was gone. The pendulum clock had vanished without a trace. Marcus ran to the university library, his heart pounding. He needed to know. Something had changed. There, buried in dusty records, he found it. The historical account had been altered. According to a diary from that winter, during the ball at Schönbrunn Palace, a military officer had fallen down the north staircase to his death while pursuing a young woman, Elizabeth von Eckhart. She had been saved by a masked stranger who vanished without a trace. Elizabeth von Eckhart married 6 months later to Friedrich Schauer, Marcus read aloud. His hands trembled. But that's a paradox, he whispered. If he never lost Elizabeth, he never would have built the clock to go back and save her. Then something else caught his eye. A genealogical chart tracing the descendants of Friedrich and Elizabeth Schauer. And there it was. Elise Gruber, born Schauer, 1908-1985. Marcus froze. It all made sense now. Elise wasn't just some antique shopkeeper. She was part of this loop, part of this ripple through time. Then he saw another name in the family tree and felt a chill crawl down his spine. Captain Heinrich Müller, born 1730, died 1762. The officer who fell down the stairs, the man Marcus had stopped. No, he murmured, feeling the blood drain from his face. He kept reading, and the horror settled in. Heinrich Müller was his ancestor, on his mother's side. The man he had let die was his great-great-great-grandfather. Marcus staggered back from the table, his breath shallow. He looked at his hands and gasped. They were becoming translucent. He was fading. A time paradox, he thought, panic rising. I erased my own bloodline. I was never supposed to exist. He tried to stand, but his legs barely responded. The people in the library went about their business, oblivious to his presence like he was already gone. As his body faded, as his existence unraveled, a single cruel truth hit him. By saving Elizabeth and restoring Schauer's future, he had undone his own. Time doesn't tolerate paradoxes. It cleans up after itself. His last thought was of Elise Gruber. Did she know? Had she given him the clock, fully aware that it would erase him? And then, nothing. No Marcus Rayner, no sleepless apartment, no lonely watchmaker. Time rewrote itself, as if he had never been. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you wanted to miss the next story. Time moves fast, but our stories remain, even when their protagonists vanish.